Ron and I are gonna ease in on you. Oh, you said you started at 10? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, he's great. That takes a hump of you.
Children.
Guys, we're on.
Do they still make them? 'Cause okay, those are all.
Guys, we're on. Oh, Good afternoon and welcome to the Board Budget Workshop on April 16, 2025. This is a workshop and I'm going to turn this over now to Dr. Watts.
Thank you so much. And this is a continuation of our earlier conversation. Just want to level set and ground everyone in where we have decided to invest our focus and our dollars for the upcoming school year. As you can see, the larger green box is our investment or our priority of instructional excellence and how we're going to be focused on the classroom and what is needed at the schoolhouse. Earlier today, you had a presentation that aligns to the yellow box and how we might be able to optimize compensation and benefits. And we'll also spend a little bit of time today talking about the strategic and continued use of our funds to sustain operations and accelerate progress towards our performance indicators. I just want to take another minute to say that our discussion today is not just about fiscal management. It is about asking tough questions, which I always invite from this group and the community. It's about setting clear priorities. It's about measuring outcomes and making adjustments. For me, is about being bold enough to say no, but also courageous enough to say yes when things are needed the most. We want to, in our discussion today and as we move forward into the future, we want to not just be about dollars and cents, but about the value that we bring to this region as it relates to our instruction and the way we serve our students both now and in the future. So given that, we have a lot of influencing factors that we consider. As you can see on this slide, it's a little bit of a balance beam that we are looking at because we have to consider both the local and state economic landscape, what is happening federally, which we all know sitting up here that there's some uncertainty nationally about what's happening and how that may impact us. We have to sustain operations, and there are also unfunded mandates that come from the state. But internally, we also have a strategic plan that we're dedicated to, and we want to advance and accelerate progress and outcomes. We are constantly looking at both qualitative and quantitative data. We're looking at our historical investments, and you all have heard a lot about return on investment. And as we think about that, we are looking at the history of how our dollars have been spent and what do we need to stop, start, and continue. And of course, throughout this process, we have been galvanizing and collecting, and we will continue to do so, both board, parent, and community engagement. So these are kind of all the things we are trying to balance to keep the beam lined up perfectly in terms of how we serve our students. If you'll go to the next slide, I'm going to kick it over to the finance team, and today you'll observe a little bit of a dance between me and the finance team where there will be certain slides the finance team will cover and certain slides I will cover, so appreciate the dance. But we also invite you to dance with us by joining dialogue and asking questions where questions emerge. So with that said, I will turn it over to Paige to cover our funding sources.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving me your time. We're going to be discussing some of our three main funding sources of revenue, which includes our federal, state, and our local revenue, which makes up our budget. On this first graph right here, I wanted to show how much money we receive and have received since fiscal year '21 in the local revenue, which is the top blue line. We start out in fiscal year '21 with the actual, not the budget, since we have those figures to see how much we actually received in revenue. On the middle line, that is our state revenue, and the bottom line is our federal revenue, which looks like a straight line, but it's because it's so small in comparison to the other two that it kind of makes the line like straight, even though it's not, because it's so much less than the other two. But I did put data labels on it so you can see exactly how much we received. Fiscal year '21 and '22, '23, and '24 are all actual numbers. Our fiscal year '25 is our revised budget that we currently have. I did not use actual because we're only 3/4 of the year through, and if I did that, it would only show 3/4 of our revenue. So I put in our budgeted amount for our revenues, and then the last dot on the line is our fiscal year '26 projected revenues. We have not received any of our information yet, but I did for the local revenue, we projected an increase of about 10% based on a historical data and the fact that we have continued to go up on that. And as you can see, that makes up about 65% of our revenue, the local revenue does. And it has continued to increase, and we're projecting the federal revenue next year, I mean, not the federal, the local revenue next year to come in at $456 million. Our local revenue has been increasing slowly. It makes up about 35% of our budget. And as you can see, in fiscal year '25, the current modified budget or revised budget is $206 million, and we are showing 202 for '26. And you might go, well, why are you going down? It's not so much that we are losing money, but when we adopt the budget each year, we cannot put in state grants that we're not sure we're going to receive because we're told they're one time only. Now, many of these renew. For example, the hygiene grant. We have been getting that for several years, but that we take that out each year. There's several grants that we do not put in there to adopt the budget because we have not been told by the state that we're going to get them. So on there, that is why that looks like less. Plus, some of the state grants that are in the general fund also have carry forward money. So after we've adopted it, when they find out, oh, you have this much from the prior year, that also increases it during the year. So I just didn't want you to look at the graph and think that we're actually going down in state money. We are not. It is just that that is the way when we adopt it. We cannot just assume that we're going to receive all of the state grants. If we know we are, they're in there. But if they're one that is a 1 year, and that's all we've been told, we take them out the next year. The bottom line is our federal monies, and for this year we got, and this is only general fund, we received $1.3 million, so for next year it was projected to put in 1.3 again. Now that is an extremely uncertain number because federal dollars are very unknown at this time, but for right now, that makes up less than 1%. It makes up 0.22% of our budget. So as far as general fund revenue, it's not a large portion of it. I am going to show a slide that shows the grants and all the federal money that is not in the general fund, so you can see, I can see everybody kind of wondering about that.
There's much more money in the federal funding. This
Yes,
is just
you're gonna
the portion of the federal fund that lives in the general fund. Most of those federal dollars live under another budget code. So that's why that line looks flat, and that's why that line looks like, but you'll see the real federal dollars a little bit later in the presentation.
Before you get too far, because this slide, I think, will be where I want to always reiterate, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that state funding is what we actually add to our general fund after the state pulls back their 5 mills.
Yes, I used our midterm that we just received, our midterm allotment from the state, and I used that for the next year because that is always relatively close. Once I get those numbers from the state, I will drop in the exact numbers. But that is based on our midterm now because it looked even at our FTE from prior years and has adjusted. So right at this point, that is the best numbers that we have. But yes,
No,
this
that's
is
fine,
minus
Ms.
the
Cooley.
5 mil.
Yep, I'm going to say it every time I can, that the state to play and get that $206 million in the 2025 revised budget, we immediately have to give back 5 mils of our allocation, which hovers around 100 million most years, correct? It's somewhere close. You don't have to give me
The
the,
QBE, it's huge.
Yes.
That sounds right. I would
Yeah.
want to look that up to give exact
I'm not going to make you
numbers.
quote it, but last time I looked at it, it was somewhere between 95 and 100 million that immediately gets pulled back to the state. So we could easily flip-flop that blue and red line by a lot if we actually were given what the state told us they were going to give us when they pull back that 5 mils.
I will mention many, many years ago when I first started working here that it was the opposite. The state made up about 65% of our budget and the local made up about 34, 35. So as you can see, the state has kind of pulled back and put more and more on the local taxpayers. Federal funding.
So with that said, we want to dive a little bit deeper into each one of those. Was there another question?
What you just said, I think, is really important for our local community to understand. And I don't know if there's a quick way to do a graph or something that shows over the years how that funding source has transitioned. But I think that's really important for our local community to understand why we have to rely so much on our local community for school funding versus the
Yes.
state.
And we'll cover some of that, but I think in our next bite at the apple in terms of our budget, I think it would be easy to go back and look at the allocation sheets and show how much we earned in QBE versus how much the state took back, resulting in what we actually received. I mean, I could do that, and you can look up those allocation sheets yourself and see what that number is. So we can definitely show that in an upcoming presentation. So to dig a little bit deeper into each one of those buckets, I want to spend just a little bit of time first focused on federal funding. And I want to set the tone for this discussion or this next piece by talking about something that is new to us, something we're experiencing now, that the conditions of our federal funding have changed. And there is a legal element to that and some risk associated with that. So as I have shared with the board, as of recent, we have been given a directive to sign off on certification that we are complying with the federal civil rights laws, which was basically established in the Harvard case, that federal funding is used appropriately and does not discriminate based on race and some other issues, and that the way we are spending our money in the district does not focus on or should not highlight or prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. If so, we could be in violation of the law. And so I have to sign off on a document by April 22nd certifying that we do not have any of these practices happening within our district, or we could face penalty. The penalty could include withholding federal funds in the future, and even more severely, it could look at us 3 years prior to this year and require us to pay back federal funding that has been given to us in the past. So with those uncertainties, this all brings about certain uncertainties because we're not really sure how far this law applies. It could mean ways that we have practiced spending money before, programs that we have invested in could be seen by the federal government as in violation of these laws, and we would run the risk of losing funding. So I wanted to preface all that by stating the new conditions that we are living under nationally, and understanding that within my leadership influence and impact, I would never want to put our district in a position where we would lose federal funding because it has a tremendous impact across our district. So with that said, I will hand it over to Ms. Cooley, and she will go over what our federal funding sources look like.
Thank you. On this graph, you can see this is all of our special revenue funding, which is our federal funding. We have various programs in it, such as Title I, our federal special ed, JROTC, food services. One of the ones that is highlighted is our CARES Act, and I just wanted to mention that one because this is looking at fiscal year 25 revenue funding. And the reason we're looking at that is because we want to see what can we anticipate for next year and how much are we currently receiving that is not in the general fund from the federal government, and these are all the accounts. Now, we know that the CARES Act finished. We were given till the end of December to spend this money, and that was how much we had, and that has been spent, and we will not receive that 18.499 because that was from COVID, the ESSER and CARES Act money. So we have used up the amounts they've given us, and we will not receive more for that because COVID is passed. So that number is for sure coming out next year. Now, all of these others, we are not certain at this time of what we're going to receive because we just don't know exactly what federal funding is going to be at this time. And so this is a big question mark. But as you can see here, it does make up this year over $100 million in our revenue. So that's one of the things we need to figure out, plan for based on if we did not receive any of it, if we receive some of it, if certain grants go away, if certain ones don't. This is all question marks and things for the board to kind of decide for next year how we will handle it if it does go away. So I just wanted to put that up there. Yes, sir.
Question, education for the homeless, is that McKinney-Vento?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
So if you'll go to the next slide, I think we have gotten some direction, and I invite Mr. Butler to the microphone. We have gotten some direction on a few of our federal grants, and he's going to highlight how we are adjusting to the direction we have received to date.
So great morning. So our teams have been closely monitoring and examining, as we've discussed this morning, the evolving landscape. And so the intent here is really just to provide you with a brief snapshot of where we are and where we anticipate changes and how we are proactively really planning to adapt in the event funding is impacted. So our goal really as a department is to ensure that we're maximizing our funds and planning for sustainability and impact in mind. You'll notice that the status column, we've organized to highlight those grants where we've confirmed adjustments for fiscal year 26 and how we may be planning for fiscal year 27. Potential adjustments in areas where we're making some shifts in anticipation of reduced funding or based on policy changes and wasteful spending. So you'll see how we're preparing here for a few of those grants, but largely many of the grants we're still awaiting guidance.
Yes, please, Ms. Grabowski.
So many questions. So like the world language grant, it's okay at one school but not at another? Like what differentiates from one to the?
It was terminated at one school.
Yeah.
They've already told us that.
Alright.
Right, but why is it being terminated at one school and not the other?
The Department of Defense identified that grant as they are reviewing as a wasteful spending. So that was the extent of the termination notice that we received.
So the world language program that remains in place at the other K-8 school is not Department of Defense funding? Is that the difference?
So I want to be clear, this is just one school and it's impacted one staff member. And this is at one of our K-8 schools. But yes, there is another grant at that same school that they're still able to utilize.
Okay, so it's the funding source. I'm just trying to understand the differentiation between what appear to be the same program on its face, but the funding
Two
sources
different-
are different.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess my question is, how did we decide which school, or did they decide which school?
They
That they decide.
They
They
decided.
decided. What school?
Right.
It's at Pulaski.
Dr. Brinkman?
So we have more than one position at more than one K-8 school that is funded by the World Language Grant.
So Department of Defense grant.
The Department of Defense
So there are
grant.
there are a couple grants we
Well,
have.
so that's the one they're cutting, but do we have multiple people, or is there just one person for the grant, and that was it, or are there other positions still within that grant? So it's just that grant, okay, one person, done, gotcha. It wasn't like they said, you have three, we're gonna terminate one. They just terminated the only one funded by, so the grant's gone
Just showing
completely.
you the staff impact.
Now I'm there. Thank you for
Okay,
bringing
yeah,
me to the
that
water.
was, I was confused. So we have other world language programs at other K-8 schools
But they're
that
not
are not
funded.
funded by the
Yes.
DOD.
That is
Okay,
correct.
got it. Okay.
Right. And is MSAP as a whole at risk?
And so we're simply planning for adjustments primarily because this is the last year of the MSAP grant. So some of this, again, is just some general planning. So that's why.
The point that we wanted to make, and Dr. Hoskins-Brown is not here, but in the most recent board members' meetings, she has highlighted or asked the question, how are we adjusting or preparing? So the series of the next two slides was in response of that, which is a fair and valid question given the national landscape right now, and our employees have been asking about what the impacts are. So this is to communicate back out to the community and to our employees what we are doing to adjust and plan for potential adjustments. With that said, on the next couple of slides, I believe, we have some other mitigation strategies. Someone to advance. So should we find ourselves needing to make larger adjustments based on changes in federal funding, we wanted to list out, and I want to make sure I highlight the word potential in the header here. Should we need to make greater adjustments, these are potential mitigation strategies that we may use. So first, we would consider, or we could consider, transitioning staff into existing vacancies into our general fund budget. So if they're federally funded, just as you saw on the previous slide, we could move them over into general funds as long as there was an alignment of their certification. Worst case scenario, and I put that in parentheses, we might need to highlight it because I do not want to send alarm through the community. We could do a reduction in force. That is not something that we would consider as a first step. We could sunset programs, we could leverage attrition, we could close out and not fill vacancies that may be existing. Some potential other mitigation strategies we could employ would be hiring freezes, reduction of hours, furlough days, freezing pay. Earlier today, I think you heard about the implications and the consequences when we freeze pay. So again, that would probably not be one we would want to go to first. And then we could look at ways that we generate revenue as a way to mitigate use of fund balance. And I want to, again, make sure that I'm not raising alarm in the community, but there could be a discussion about a millage rate increase. Again, all of these are potential. I want to highlight, underline, and underscore that. But when asked the question, how are we planning, should we need to make pivots, these are all the different strategies that we have to talk about, discuss, and of course, get board approval for. No particular order in any of these, just a menu.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Just sitting here thinking, and we all know that Title I supports underprivileged students, which is a close alignment with DEI. And you opened up earlier about dancing. You can line dance, you can two-step, or you can break dance. And when I think about Title I, I'm thinking about break dancing because that's a close alignment, and I'm really concerned that DEI may have an impact on Title I simply because of being underprivileged with being closely linked with diversity and equity. Have you heard anything from any other district or your colleagues, other superintendents, with this concern regarding Title I and federal funding?
I would say most superintendents across the country are concerned because we don't know the extent in which this condition notice, the certification that we have to sign off on, we don't know how far that applies. It could apply to a partner that we're working with that may be a partner that talks about equity, right? Many of our partners highlight equity as a foundational part of its mission and vision. So if someone were looking at that, they could assume that we are investing our dollars in a partner that supports equity, which could put our dollars at risk. It could go as far as hiring practices. There are a list of different things. We have not gotten very clear guidance. We have been told, however, that if we are in violation, we could risk ending our funding, and the penalty would be also to go back 3 years of funding. But we don't have concrete rules about what it applies to and what it does not. So as a district right now, we are looking at all of our policies, we're looking at all of our practices, where we're spending our money, and we are trying to highlight places where we think this may be a violation or a risk for us, and then we'll have to make necessary adjustments.
Ms.
Who
Camp-
will determine the violations when, so we're
Yes, the
guessing.
court will.
We're
The courts will.
We're trying to decide if we're in violation and who will determine that we are in violation.
Would be someone who wanted to investigate us and raise that to a place of litigation.
Ms. Campbell?
Ms. Holt, were you saying that you were worried that because Title I is linked to DEI, you believe, this wasn't about maybe us not having a policy, or still having a policy that we hadn't gotten rid of, or? Okay, so to that, I would say, I looked up some information on this while I was reviewing this information for today. And there are articles of the new administration stating over and over again in NPR, in New York Times, that, I mean, I can read you the quote. Federal funding would not disappear, but be redirected to the states, particularly Title I. They're trying to return education to state and local levels while ensuring key funding streams remain intact. So I wouldn't panic about DEI being linked to Title I. It seems like Title I is something that is going to be preserved no matter, even if it comes to the states. The other I can't speak
Unless it's found to be in
to.
violation. If we are found to be using those funds in a way that goes against this certification that I have to sign off on, it would become
I
a potential
understand
risk,
that portion.
yes. And I think our training this afternoon, there's a deeper dive into this
There is.
topic, so you all can learn more from maybe some legal experts on this topic.
Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Hall.
Dr. Watts, it seems like some sort of tutorial on language is going to be probably helpful to us in terms of all speaking in the same tongue with the same precautions.
Yes, I think today's training will set us up nicely to do that.
Yes.
Have that discussion. Okay, with that said, that is kind of our information on federal funding. Let's now move over to state and local. And Ms. Cooley, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. On this slide right here, this was produced because there was a question by Ms. Campbell in a prior, one of our prior meetings about how our costs per student seem to be higher than maybe other districts comparable to us. And so what I've done here is just a graph of the cost per student that was in our annual comprehensive financial report. And what I do want to emphasize is I'm not sure what you were comparing it to, but we have to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. For example, this number right here that comes from the CAFR is all funds, not just the general fund. There is a graph, the next graph, with just the general fund, but it is all funds. And part of that is the ESSER and CARES, which we received an extraordinary amount of money in comparison to some of the other districts surrounding us. And so that, of course, has made our amounts look very high in recent years because we did get quite a few because we have a large Title I population, and the CARES ESSER funds were tied to Title I, and that's how they determined how much your district received. And so I do want to point that out. One thing that it kept going to on the ESSER funds is we did not go immediately when we got ESSER funds and just spend it only on like masks and things like that. Like when people started first panicking over it, we kind of held our money to what would be the most beneficial for the students in the long term. So we kind of spread our dollars out over a long period instead of spending them in the first couple of years of receiving them. That's why we're this year just finishing up the last bit, because we did use it in a manner that we did do those masks and stuff like everyone, but we also did not put like so much money into that like certain districts could have done. But on here, I do want to mention that besides the ESSER funds, one of the things that has gone up so much is our health insurance. For example, our health insurance back in 2019, it cost us about $77 million. That was our actual cost for health insurance, $77.2 million for all of the employees. Our actuals in '24 were $110.6 million for health insurance cost. And then for the fiscal year 25 adopted, we have budgeted, which includes vacancies, because we do put health insurance in a vacancy because most people do take our health insurance. We have budgeted $149 million. I do want to comment that currently in our general fund that we have 2,234 unfunded by the state employees that are fully locally funded. Now, the state does help us by giving us money for health insurance for most of our teachers, but not all of them. For example, art teachers are not one that the state funds. We fund that locally, so we have to cover that health insurance for all of those teachers and for throughout the district, parapros and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to state that what it cost us for our unfunded this year, health insurance costs per employee $22,620. So for every employee, we pay that amount, no matter who they are. And the state was on something, the state only funds mainly certificated. They do fund a few non-certificated, but it's very minor. So when they say they're going to fund those, we're talking about low numbers compared to our 2,234 unfunded teachers, custodians, bus drivers, that sort of thing. And if you take what it would have cost us in fiscal year 15, we were only spending $11,340 on health insurance per employee. So that cost us, if we were to do that now based on our unfunded, it would be an additional $25 million, $25.3 million if I took the 2,234 unfunded employees times the 11,340, that comes to a little over 25 million. If you take that in today's time, what it's going to cost us for next year for that 2,234 employees times the 22,620, that's going to cost us, just for the health insurance of unfunded, over $50 million. So as you can see, things are rising. In addition to that, our retirement has gone up astronomically. And none of these are things that we can change. They are dictated by the state as to what we have to pay. So it's not like we can say we're going to go with a different insurance provider or something. We do it through the state. Our retirement in fiscal year 15 was at 13.15%. This year, it is at 20.78%. Next year, it is at 21.91%. And when I say that amount, it is that percent of their salary. So whatever their salary is times 21.91, it has gone from 13 in fiscal year 15 to over 21, almost 22. So that's another reason the costs do keep going up, and what is costing so much. And I just did want to point that out, in addition to all the grants. On this next slide, this is just the general fund. Not all funds, does not count the state grants.
Takes out ESSER.
It takes out ESSER. It also, we took out, because food service, which is a huge one, it takes out food service because that is a Fund 600, which is a federal fund. So this is our cost for fiscal year 24. Our cost for a student with the general fund money was $13,529. I'm not sure, what we were looking at, comparing it to others, but you have to be real careful to make sure we're comparing the exact things they are. So I just wanted to point that out. Neither one of these graphs that I've shown, the prior one or this one, includes the capital projects East Blosh. I have put a footnote at the bottom so you can see it's all of our functions except for those particular ones. And of course, on this slide, it was on the prior one for the food service because it was all grants, but this one because it's not a federal grant.
Ms. Campbell.
Is there a way to get the numbers from the prior chart that were already without East Blast, but to get them with our USDA, like food service fee attached?
When you say food
You're saying that you took out ESSER and
service is in
CARES?
this one, right here.
Is in this one?
It's in the first one here. I'm going back to the all funds. Food service is in this one.
So-
And ESSER is because it is a grant and it's not in the general fund.
Right.
So it is in there. But if you wanted to look at it more for local,
Yeah.
because local doesn't pay for any of the grants like that. So if you want to look at I'm going backwards, sorry. If you want to look at the local funds, this is what local and state general fund covers, as well as that small 0.22% of federal. So that's why I wanted this in here, so you could get a better feel when you're not counting grants, because we got such a large amount of ESSER money. We get such a large amount of Title I money compared to.
My question was more, because we're not getting the ESSER funding anymore, that being gone, I think is really good. So we can see what that number is. But we'll probably still be getting food services, correct?
Yes.
Certainly hope so. Certainly
Right.
hope so.
So I guess
that
that
is
would be
also
more.
federal.
Yeah, it's federal, but,
Yeah.
but that's my
It's not a
point.
for sure, though. I mean, right now, we are in uncertain times. Nothing is for sure on anything that's, other than
Yes.
our general fund and our state that has told us they're
I
going
think
to.
we're
We
having a
can
correction.
get those numbers for you.
Thank
We
you.
can run it with the school nutrition.
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
No, I'm good. Dr. Brinkman?
I love where the line of reasoning is going, because depending on what you put into the sausage, definitely changes its cost. Yeah, because I'm looking down here and you're saying that we've pulled the one that's up right now, pupil transportation. So I'm thinking, is that all pupil transportation, or is that what we get from the state, or is that what we get from, because we know we only get about, 8% of our pupil
About $7
transportation
million.
budget from the state. We don't need to dive into that now. It would be interesting, because this is a talking point in the community, to actually have it broken out with what we, as a board and a district, say, this is what we spend per pupil to educate, and it includes this much for power, this much for this much, but then this is how much we spend per pupil, local/federal, for transportation. This is how much we spend per pupil for
Campus
for
police,
food,
yes, for
just
all
to have it broken out, because, you know, we have our missions to do the education side of the thing, but public school has become a panacea for all the other things that we need to do in a community where it comes to mental health, feeding, transporting, X, Y,
Campus
so
police.
yes, so just
That wasn't, and we used to have very small, when I first worked here, we used to, because the city and county did most of our policing, and then they could no longer do it, they said, so we had to take that over. So that's one of the things that cost a lot of money.
I think in telling our story, and I see people like, thank you. It in all transparency, it tells the story of what does this look like, because it's a buffet, it's an a la carte. You have to, and we have to add a lot of these things. So I don't want staff having to do a ton of extra work, but I think it would help the narrative in the community to say, here's the breakdown, here's the, you know, because they just see one number and they want to post it everywhere. And I got somebody smiling, she got something to.
No, understood. We can take care of it.
Yeah.
We'll get those
I
numbers.
mean, do you get
We
that?
could do it by
Like,
function.
And I
You-
think the
all the
next slide
functions.
addresses
'Cause I
some of the
kinda
things
started
that you're
working on
saying. If
something
you'll go
like
to the
that.
next slide.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's a way to tell the community.
Dr. Brinkman, to your point, is we're sharing this narrative to the community at large. It is difficult when you talk about a per pupil expense from district to district to district, and they have different unique needs, and they may be funding different things. For
Correct.
example, and you'll see in the next couple of slides, we invest greatly in our people. For example, school nurses. We have a school nurse in every school
Every district
in
doesn't
Chatham
have that.
County. Not all districts do that in the state of Georgia.
Correct.
That's something to be applauded, but we invest in that here locally in our budget. So if you take that number and you tie it into the cost per pupil, it's going to be different when you compare it to a different district. So we wanted to illustrate for the board the difference between the previous number that was shared when that the CAFR came out under the, I'm sorry, that's the old way of calling it, but also what the work we had from our auditors do. Now, they were looking at that as an all-inclusive approach, rightfully so, and that's fine. But as we want to illustrate through the budget process, that's not exactly an apples-to-apples way to do this, and we really have to look at per pupil from a true basis of what we can control in our local budget, which primarily comes from the general fund.
Yes, what you'll see on the next slide is a little bit of the narrative that we're trying to share with folks, is that our per pupil investment is greater because the board and the community have made decisions to support things that take into account poverty and student complexity, such as a nurse at every school. We don't have to do that. We have chosen to do that. It's a great investment, but it increases our per pupil funding. A full police department, state and federal dollars do not cover that. If we want to continue to benefit from that, that's going to drive up our per pupil expenditures. And you can see some of the other things. We have the benefit of a student wellness center and dedicated staff. We've been able to give consistent cost of living adjustments over time. We also have programs like Oatland Island and Massey Heritage Center that other districts do not have. The state only gives us about $7 million for transportation, but I think we spend a little over $100 million for transportation. So we have made good choices and good investments in our district, but if you just look at the data, it does drive up the per pupil expenditures.
Mr. Smith.
Just a quick question. When we talk about a full police department doesn't necessarily mean that we have a police officer at every school, does it, or do we? We do have, okay. And
And a SSO.
an SSO.
We have 2 safety people at every school.
Okay, okay.
Other districts don't do that.
Other districts don't do- Tell me this, in this wise, I'll leave that there. Great, thank you.
Can I make a comparison just for a second? This is Ramon Ray, Human Resource. Just so, as we were talking about the 8th largest on the salary side, just so you understand, for nurses, we have the 4th largest number of nurses in the state. So remember, we are far down 9, 10 in population, but we have the 4th largest as it relates to the nurses. So that's just how we are.
Dr. Howard, I'm doing this one.
And also, when we began to compare with the smaller districts that's surrounding us, the Effingham counties and Bullock counties, in those smaller counties, sometimes they make, one person can serve as the Title I director, the curriculum specialist, the personal with transportation and food services. So when you begin to look at per pupil, it looks as if there's a lot of waste and abuse, and it's really not. We have a district of a whole nother size, and the magnitude is totally different. So those positions, they don't have program managers. They don't have those additional positions that we have at the central office level based on the size of the district.
To further illustrate your point, the state pays for one accountant for the whole district. One accountant. That's all the state pays for. That's it. Paige, that would be Paige.
We can get rid of Mr. Rader, we don't. They don't pay for him, so.
Ms. Hall?
I'm thinking in terms of language, the line additional staffing, non-state funding to meet the diverse academic and behavioral needs. We could change that to various. Let's get diverse out of there. That's Connie Hall speaking.
So I hope this paints a fuller picture of our per pupil spending and what could be attributable to the increases you see year over year, and what could be contributing to why we might be above other districts. Move to the next slide. Yes.
I'm sorry.
And let's not forget this eSPLOS, how that's included also as per pupil. When the public looks at it, they look at every dime that comes in.
It's not in either
No, I know,
graph.
I'm just saying the public's perception.
Yes.
They look at the entire budget divided by the number of students, and they say that's what the per pupil is. That's the perception of the public.
And we do have a page in our budget book where we do it with the base, and then we do it with the eSplosh and stuff added in, so you can see the difference. That's on a one page in our book. Every year we put that in too, just to let you know. Some good information in that book. On this slide, it is the same thing as the line slide that was on the prior one about the revenues, but this is just 1 year for our forecasted revenue in a bar graph, so you could look at it. Locals blue, states red, and federal is green. You can barely see that green line because it is so small in comparison. This is just general fund revenue we're anticipating for next year. On this slide, we are showing our 2026 budget reductions. We're going to reduce our startup cost. We're going to, Groves had received startup costs the last 2 years, as well as Pulaski. They come off next year. We usually do startup costs the year that they're about to come to be and the year after, so they can buy things that are not included in eSplosh. But we have added this year Windsor Forest High, and we also took off Godly Station, got a little bit of money this year. So for next year, Godly Station will not receive any more, neither will Pulaski or Groves, but we will be giving a second year to Windsor High and Bloomingdale. So that is going to reduce our startup costs because that is less than what it was before. And so that will save us a little money. Our vacancy factor, we're going to increase the vacancy factor by 10 million. And this is due to the fact that we have about, on average, 685 vacancies a month. And so that leaves money sitting there not being used unless we move it somewhere for it to be used, which we've done. But we feel like that would be a safe amount to increase vacancies by, so that we're not tying up money in vacancies. So that will be an increase which will reduce our budget by 10 million.
I can speak to the last piece, because the last piece is the divisional reductions. As I have committed, we, in good stewardship to our community, we realize that the resources, financial resources we have are not ours. They are shared and contributed for our community. We want to be good stewards of those dollars, and we want to make sure we're using them strategically and wisely. So this year, we approached our divisions, our central office budgets in a different way. We looked at a hybrid zero-based budgeting process. And as a result of really each division chief and their teams looking at their budgets from previous years, looking at places where maybe dollars had been invested in the past that were not used or did not demonstrate a high return on investment in each division. We have made reductions across each division. I think last year we made reductions of about $1 million, and this year we're adding another 8.7 million. So this slide represents the adjustments that we have made to be better stewards to our community in terms of their investment financially in our districts.
Ms. Hall.
Dr. Watts, I think that's most commendable, but I caution that if we should find, when we get into the actual operations of things, that there needs to be some adjustment, that you would feel emboldened to review
Yes.
as things may come up.
Yes, this was a over 2-month process, and we are balancing. We know we have to continue operations. We have to operate efficiently. I feel pretty good about where we are with these reductions. I don't anticipate, and I'm looking at the team for affirmation, I don't anticipate that you will see inefficiencies or ways in which we could not operate because we cut $8.7 million. I don't anticipate that.
I'll tell, I mentioned yesterday, my concern is everything being ready for August 1st. If we get to August 10th and it's smooth sailing, then,
Yes.
okay, this is great. But I just want to know that you feel you have the autonomy to change anything needing changing as we go
As
forward.
recent as 6 p.m. last night, we were making sure that everything that you see here is a conservative and fair approach, balancing the need to continue operations with being good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars. We're looking at it through both lenses.
Dr. Bringman.
I'm sorry. Is this $20 million reduction evident in the slide you gave us earlier, 49, that had the budget sources by year, that had the local at 456? Is that, it would have been 476?
No.
That was revenues, this is expenditures.
I understand that, but we base our budget off of what we think we're going to get revenue-wise, and we can adjust that revenue-wise by changing the millage so that it comes in lower than the 456. Or are we just gonna, I mean, that, I'm trying, moving pieces to build the budget. If we kept our millage at the same, you're saying that we would bring in 456 for local?
Yes, that
Correct.
was not changing the
That's the
millage rate, leaving
projection,
it the
not changing the
same.
millage.
Right.
Okay,
Yes,
and
that
moving
is correct.
forward, we're gonna reduce our budget by 20 million.
Keep in mind, you're basing that forecast on the millage rate on a tax digest that we have not seen
So
yet.
that's one of the
A
unknowns.
tax digest that I will
increase,
bet
which we
my
don't know.
salary is going to increase.
Hopefully.
I will bet a lot, just both of them.
Indicators
It's
are
going to
likely.
increase.
Yeah, indicators
I-
are likely for that. And I mean, we based it on historical digest information. But it is important to note right now in this time
have all
that
the-
we currently are, we still don't know.
Of course, we don't have all, and this is why moving forward, and we're working there, and I'm not holding anybody on district staff. We are rebuilding how we've budgeted, and I'm loving it, okay? Da-da-da-da. No. It was just pop, we were dancing, right? But if I'm reading this from the outside, I see, 456 million local, but they're cutting 20. I'm just trying to get people to understand there's a lot of pieces moving here.
There are a lot of
but,
pieces.
And this is why it would be nice to decouple those two votes and have us set a budget based on what we think we need to do, and then later on, fund it based on that millage rate, not have them so close together so that we kind of already going, oh, we're going to get this much so we can do this much. That's how it has felt in the past. I know we're getting away from that. Gosh, the return on investment program sheet, that's going to make a huge difference, but I would rather us get to a point where this 20 million is coming off of the budget number that you're asking for.
Yes.
And we're not even talking about what we think our expected revenues are going to be, because we're just saying to educate a child in Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools, this is what we want our budget to be. Then we go and look at how we're going to pay for it, where both of them for the longest time have been so
I think-
closely
yes.
intertwined.
So the approach that you're talking about, I think is the approach that we're using. So the things that you're getting ready to see are what we believe are the things that are needed,
Correct.
right? And we have our list and we have our priorities. What we want to hear from you all today is what rises to the top for you. Once we get the actual numbers, we will then revisit the list and decide what comes off and what stays on.
And then that would help us understand where we go with that 456.
But what I will say is, everything that we're going to share with you today, my commitment was we would not need to go into fund balance to fund it.
Gotcha.
So everything that we're going to show you today in terms of priorities would be able to be done in a manner that kept us out of fund balance
And reduced expenditures by 20 million.
and reduce expenditures.
Thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall.
But I also want to just highlight one other unknown, and we just talked about it. Should federal funding go away, we also need to make sure we're being thoughtful about fund balance, and if there is a need to move employees into our general funds, we've got to be thoughtful about that. We can't cut so close that if there's a need to pivot in 6 months, we are then having to look at some of those mitigation strategies. So it is truly a dance. I don't know if we're break dancing or line dancing, but it is a dance, and we don't know which song is getting ready to play.
Take 2 steps forward.
Dr. Howard Hall and then Ms. Hall.
As one of my major concerns is the return on investment and number of vacancies. Because right now, we have vacancies in several of our high-need middle schools as well as high schools in core content areas such as math, social studies, science, and reading. And with that vacancy, that's not a good reflection on our return on investment when the month is now April and we still have those vacancies in those core content areas and having substitute teachers in those classrooms.
Yes.
The entire
And
year.
your point is very valid. I think one of the things that I could say that I'm excited about is we are enhancing the way we recruit talent in our district. We hired some recruitment people this year that they can focus their full time and attention on that. But everybody, let me be 100%, everybody is a recruiter for the district, not just the 2 people we hired. I think we're seeing less resignations. We had a job fair that was fruitful for us. And depending on the economy, you may see a shift of people returning back to education as a viable field, because there may be other fields that may not be hiring as much. So there are a lot of factors, but I agree with you. Anytime we have a classroom without a teacher, we're not getting a return on investment, and we aren't serving a child in a way that we can best serve a child.
Ms. Hall?
I was just thinking as a board member how wonderful it's going to be able to brag, hey, look what we saved this year, we're heroes. That is until something goes wrong, because then we're the goats. So
The dance.
let's see this dance through, like I said, the beginning of the school year.
On this slide, this shows the expenditure adjustments that we are increasing. The prior slide showed you the proposing to increase,
Yes.
excuse me. The others was proposing to decrease, this is proposing to increase. The first 2 bars.
Don't go into them, because we'll go into them later.
Okay.
It's just an overview.
Overview.
So, we wanted
Thank
to
you.
remind you that in February, we shared some blue sky thinking projected expenditures or ways that we could invest in our budget for the upcoming year. And you all gave us some feedback. In strategic priority 1, you can see this is again board input. You all highlighted adding pre-K classrooms as a number 1 priority, and as a low priority, you indicated that having attendance and engagement staff supplements were important, and you can see the in-between. If you'll go to the next slide, I don't know if I have anybody up there, but it would be our stakeholders, and I can't remember the feedback on this one, I apologize. Yes. Oh, it's actually our employees. So you highlighted in February that the PRS and cost sharing for eligible retirement was your number 1 priority, and you deprioritized that additional HR staff was needed, and you can see the in-between. On the next slide, your feedback to us was that you wanted us to make sure we had an investment in additional funding for routine maintenance, and you deprioritized any additional funding going to the renovation or relocation of Bull Street, and you can see in between. So we just wanted to remind you of what you told us in February. You'll go to the next slide. So now we want to dig deeper into our priorities as we move forward. I think this is highlighting specifically what Dr. Bringman was saying. Can we first create what is the optimal situation in terms of how we make our investments for each year? And when we actually get our resources, we can decide what to deprioritize in that discussion. So what you're going to see on the next few slides is a deep focus on instructional excellence. Because again, if you'll remember the bigger green box, we want to make sure this year we're focused on what is happening at the schoolhouse. And you'll see the areas that we'll touch on. You'll also see a big focus in what we believe should be a priority for the board, and that is optimizing compensation. We've already had a deep dive in that. We do have some areas around outreach and engagement and sustainability that we want to highlight, to include the discussion about pools that we had back in February. So we've gone back and we've monetized that so that we can give you an update on that. So again, stressing to you on the next slide that the approach that we've taken here is to reallocate where we can reallocate, maintain investments where we have seen return on investment, and in places where we think we need to increase or add funding that would accelerate our progress as a district, that was another lens that we looked at this through as we moved our priorities forward, or as we're moving our priorities forward. So we will have our academics team and our schools office present on our investment proposal and instructional excellence.
All righty. So as we prepare for the upcoming school year, of course, our focus remains on providing high-quality instruction and ensuring that every student is positioned for success. We're presenting 6 priority budget items for the upcoming year, each designed to really move the needle on student growth, achievement, and readiness. And these investments were really developed in collaboration across our academic departments. I'll begin with our secondary literacy. This year, we're proposing a district rollout of the Science of Reading aligned professional development tailored specifically for our middle school teachers and leaders. And this will include 2 learning and leadership pathways. Certainly want to highlight the benefits here. Really, the intent is to a long-term plan is a continuation and a continuum of literacy support. While year 1 will focus on middle school, our goal is to build the capacity of and consistency across our K-12 continuum. The second priority is focused on bolstering our post-secondary readiness tools. While we currently are provisioned with a state resource, there are some limited features, so we want to make sure that we are providing a tool that ensures access both for our students, our staff, and really there's an opportunity to engage our families as well. So we're proposing a comprehensive post-secondary readiness platform that really centralizes some of the support and access for our staff. And of course, there are some benefits here. The idea really is to continue reinforcing college and career readiness.
Is this like a local version of Georgia Futures?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll have my colleague share the others.
Can we say something, Mr. Butler?
Yes.
This is really great. If we can accomplish this, this is really good to see. This is something I often hear parents of rising seniors who seem lost in this whole process of getting their kids into college. So this is wonderful. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. So the next proposal that we're bringing before you is a focusing on our younger students in the foundational grades, kindergarten through second grade, and an investment in high dosage tutoring, where we are targeting a population of our students that we know are still learning the foundations of reading. And this proposal is grounded in the science of reading. So what happens here is we have that direct alignment as we are continuing to develop our teachers in the science of reading. We know that students are still experiencing some gaps. So this intense high dosage research-based tutoring will allow us to learn more about what it is that we need to be doing and replicate across more schools. So this is the first iteration of high dosage tutoring. This does not take away from what our current staff will be doing in the school, so it won't deprive students of core instruction. This actually augments core instruction, and it gives us real-time data so that we can have lessons learned to be able to replicate this process if needed in the future.
I will add to this is the section that you're hearing from Dr. Barnes is our attempt over the next year to have a plan to differentiate support for our high-need schools. So the next two slides are for a specific subset of schools until we get a more comprehensive plan, which we hope to have next year. But this is our start, kind of breadcrumbing to what we might do across a larger group of schools that we define and want to focus in on.
So how many schools, so for this first
Just two.
subset? Just 2 schools?
For next year.
For next year, yeah.
When we get a more comprehensive differentiated
Okay.
plan, it would be more than 2
So
schools.
these strategies, we're talking about 2 schools for next year?
Just next year,
Okay.
so we can pilot it.
Okay.
But this
Learn
actual
before
tutoring,
we-
yes.
Go bigger.
Yes, Ms. Hall.
Dr. West, can you flesh this out a little more?
Flesh out the differentiated school plan? Yes, so we've talked a number of times, and I've heard you all lift this up, and there is a need for it. We have schools that experience various challenges that are inhibiting the progress that we know our students can make. We need to figure out what the differentiated support plan looks like for those schools. But that starts off with defining what we mean when we say a high challenge school, what data, what's the criteria, and then we need to decide what are the additional investments we're going to make in those schools. And so as we look to next year, you'll see a more thought-out plan. Is it more staffing? Is it that we're going to pay employees more in those schools? Is it that those schools get things like high-dosage tutoring or other programs that we know that might help them get on track and accelerate? But we are going to pilot a few things, small scale for 1 year, to figure out what works before we implement that across more than one school. Is that helpful?
Yes, and especially if you can do that and keep us out of trouble?
Oh, we're gonna be out of trouble.
Okay.
We don't, unless it's good trouble.
What you're doing is really focusing on the needs of our kids.
Right.
So, like I said, we can do that. That's great.
Howard Hall?
When we say high-need schools, you know, I always talk about the school culture and climate. We can't leave it out.
It's coming next. Go to the next slide.
That's big.
There's more to come.
Okay. All right, I'm sitting patiently, I'm waiting.
Okay, so before we go on, I would like to say this is all very exciting. One thing I would love, and I think my board members will agree with me, we have always had schools on the CSI or TSI. I would like for us to get to a point that none of our schools are on that list. And whatever plans that we're making needs to include that.
So those are all great points, and some of the data that you just talked about drives us in selecting the schools that would be part of this differentiated support. Quite naturally, now we don't have any schools on the CSI list, and we want to continue that to be the case. However, we know that there are schools that have worked hard to come off the list, and they have done some things. We want to learn from that, but we also want to make sure we give them the foundation so they don't get back on the list. So in essence, we got to move more students faster in a shorter period of time so that they don't fall in a rank order and be at the bottom of a state's list or a federal list. So that is part of that conversation of selecting the right schools. The second part of the differentiated support for high need schools will focus on, quite naturally, focusing on people, developing the skill set of people that allows them to function at a high level. A key thing in schools is that they are equipped to be able to reach students in a manner that builds strong relationships, raise expectations, set the bar high, and being able to differentiate the level of support and instructional needs needed for students to be successful. So the next proposal is an investment in a comprehensive differentiated ask that will focus around leadership development, that's going to continue to focus around classroom coaching and developing teachers, not just on pedagogy, but also developing teachers around student culture and classroom management and high levels of student engagement, being able to move classrooms from what we will call ritual compliance, where students are sitting and may not be actively engaged, or they could be just wondering, to students that are actively participating in the instruction, actually being able to answer questions, support their claims, and do exactly what teachers are asking them to do. This is a redefining of the classroom so that we can ensure that pedagogy is happening, and it's just no longer just compliance. Students are actually engaged in the instruction.
I'll add to this just by saying that this stems from a belief that I have that when you're working in a challenged school, it takes a different skill set, a different mindset, a different level of resilience and grit than working in a traditional school. You're serving a different population. You have to move with different urgency and different practices sometimes to move those kids faster. So we can invest money, we can invest programs, but if you don't strengthen pedagogy, mindset, and practice, the money won't truly benefit in the way that we want to. So this is our attempt to build in opportunities to enhance practice around transformation, which is different than just regular progress. It's a different skill set.
Ms. Kowalski.
I was so excited to hear you say everything you just said about really rethinking about how we even act with our students in the classroom and recognizing that, and we were just having a sidebar before this,
Yes.
about the need for physical activity in the, like, asking a student to sit, for 90 minutes, or having the expectation of our elementary school students to always walk single file, not say a word, and have it, like, there has to be structure, but we also have to recognize the human need for movement and the human need for, like, all of those human elements. So I know this is focused on our high-needs schools, and I'm thrilled to death to see that we're doing this, so this is amazing. I hope we will also take this opportunity to look at strategies and really innovative practices that can also be used in all of our schools throughout the district.
Absolutely.
I know that we will, but I think it's important to say that out loud, and I'm so excited to hear more about this and track our progress as we pilot these.
Actually, we started with some schools this year. I don't remember. You passed us an investment to allow us to start, and some of the principals that we've started with are in some of our higher performing schools. So we can begin to build their capacity as well. So we've looked at it across different schools to see how we might roll out the next iteration.
This is great. Thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall.
And this is good with the job-embedded coaching and the pedagogy mindset. However, we have schools that we can't control embedding what goes on outside of the home. For example, tardiness. Have 200 and 300 students reporting tardy every day. That's one factor that's going to disrupt instruction. I know we can only do so much, but so what component are we including to provide some type of training or workshops for our parents? Because we need our parents to assist as well, because those students are reporting tardy regularly, over 200 students at a time, daily. And that's a problem. Not every school, but I'm not going to mention the school's name, but I know what's going on.
It goes on in some schools, but I'll also say that we have schools in this district that serve the same population of kids, but with extremely different outcomes and observations. Same demographic, same type of kid, but the leadership and the mindset in those particular schools yield a different outcome.
And that's the point that I'm honing in
Yes.
on.
So
what are we doing about it? Because it's a major issue.
Yeah, so some of those things that we're talking about is not necessarily a budget as it is sometimes a performance management
Absolutely.
responsibility. So I've had the opportunity to observe a lot of schools and just look at what was taking place. In many cases, there were things we can do different as leaders and as employees to tighten up some systems around our campuses. And we have to be more intentional around naming those things, providing the necessary supports so that ultimately all of our staff are rising to the expectation that we're establishing for them.
Support and accountability.
So that is the idea. Now, what that translates to is really defining what accountability looks like for that happening at a high level or when that doesn't happen at a high level.
Ms. Hall.
If I'm the school that has 99% on-time attendance every day, and Tanya, you're the school that 100 kids are late every day, part of our accountability as a board is to see that I get the opportunity to discuss what I have done at my school to
They get
get
that.
where I am.
They get that.
Now, if I, so, this
Yes.
isn't an accusation. I'm just saying we need to encourage as much as possible principals
Yes.
and leadership teams getting to interact so that I can teach you what I've done, and you're not waiting for something, to pie out of the sky one day to find out what I'm doing. So the fact that it's right within our district should make it easier. We're not having to go out anywhere. But I hope that that kind of interaction among our principals, that they have a chance to do that.
Yes.
And my other question, Dr. Watt, with the classroom level coaching, doesn't the gifted endorsement piece fall into that. Because if I'm going and getting a gifted endorsement, I'm learning all these different techniques that heretofore we thought would just be for our highest achieving kids. But I'm learning.
It's a part of it, I would say it's a part of it, but this is a lot more streamlined, defined, prescripted, explicit. It doesn't require a teacher to take what they learned and gifted and then translate it into their practice. This is a lot more very specific ways to do a think, pair, share, or very specific ways in which pedagogy is working, but it also addresses the mindset. It's very different.
Okay. I know a lot of teachers and parents and taxpayers think that if they go in a classroom and everybody's quiet and they're sitting and that's something wonderful. So I'm just, this coaching needs to
Yes.
change that whole paradigm, I guess is what I'm saying. So.
Yes, ma'am. So that's what I was speaking to. It takes it from what you just described as ritual compliance. They're just there and they appear to be engaged to actually being actively engaged. So educators on the board, I know you're familiar with the strategy that many of us use is I do, we do, and you do, right? It's just that explicit. And so we have to really teach people how to walk through this situation and give an explicit directions, explicit instruction, so that the teacher understands when I set up my instructional lesson, I say these things, now I'm gonna move to, and I'm gonna work with students. We're gonna replicate, and this is how I want students to follow me in doing this process. Now, when I release them to do their own learning and their own problem solving, how to monitor what the student is doing and engaging the student in a think aloud, so we can get the student to think like the teacher. Then we can start seeing the cognitive lift goes from the teacher to the student, which then students begin to learn. Now, there is a thought that once students begin to learn and get more excited about school, tardies begin to reduce.
Yes.
Chronic absenteeism began to reduce because school becomes an environment where they feel successful. It's not a one piece that will fit the entire puzzle. There are multiple pieces, but this is one of the approaches that we can potentially ramp up. Not even potentially. We will increase student achievement, but we also will change some other metrics along the journey as well.
Guys, we have about 10 minutes, so, yeah,
Can we take 15 minutes?
yeah, okay, I'll make
Okay.
it 15.
Let's keep moving.
Here we go.
All right, so the next ask is investment in our staffing allocation adjustments. This was briefed with you in our last session. So there's going to be a focus on assistant principals, secretarial positions, the school counselors, and media specialists. What you see here is the change in the staffing allotments. The direct impact, what we see is in assistant principals. A large change here lives in the high school ranks, where in some cases, this takes a 0.5 to a whole position, which we were already doing, but also it addresses where we have larger high schools that have less assistant principals. So this provides more supervision and oversight to assistant principal in supporting instruction. We're looking at the greatest investment here is in high school. The change would be an additional one in middle school and about 4 that we'll see an improvement in K-8s, and those are our larger K-8s. The second one is around secretaries. We have a lot of secretaries that were in 0.5 positions, could have been a 1.5, things of that nature in our schools. So what this does is it right-sizes it so that we have a full-time person at a school every day. And this directly impacts 17 of our 21 elementary schools that will gain a 0.5, and then 3 of our 21 elementary schools may see at least a 1 increase there, but everyone will actually get to a whole position. Similar numbers look the same through middle school, K-8, and high school. One of the things that we found by adjusting the formula, this allows us to also ramp up the support around attendance clerks, so we don't have to have an ask for attendance clerks, but that becomes an actual responsibility that we can
And
build
bookkeeping.
into the formula for the additional staff that may be there.
And the bookkeeping.
And the bookkeeping, yes.
Right.
Media clerks, this goes also back to the 0.5. Many schools have 0.5, so we're just right-sizing that to make it a whole position. Similar discussion as that of secretaries. In terms of our counselors, this is actually a reallocation of counselors moving from the central office now being put into the actual schools. And so what that does is it supports the overall social emotional learning of students and give actual school counseling, more people to provide school counseling, more so than all of the actual compliance things that counselors may end up doing, such as threat assessments, suicide assessments, and things of that nature. They can really provide a actual school counseling support that's needed to help our students. In terms of our middle school electives, those are all reallocations, which is zero ask and ISS paraprofessionals.
Okay, so you know I'm going to ask.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go. Yeah, so let's go back over this reallocation for. I hate that we call them elective teachers, but anyway, band and art and health. What do you mean by reallocation?
So what this is happening, we already have some above allotments that's already given to schools and they're baked in, so they are already there, so it's not an additional budget ask.
We're just going to designate them to teach certain areas to make sure that we're offering.
That's correct. And so after doing further investigation, I know that you was going to ask about chorus. So doing a deeper investigation, currently 6 of our high schools already offer chorus. So there is an ask, and 4 of our high schools would like to offer chorus. 3 of our middle schools currently offer chorus. 5 would like to offer, and then we have 6 of our K-8 schools currently offer chorus, and we have an additional 4 that said they would like to offer chorus to
Oh,
students.
they're all getting chorus.
Well, I can't say that. What I'm saying is what we're
Let's
working
go
on.
back to they're all getting chorus.
What I am saying is we're creating an opportunity where there's an elective and there is a high student interest that we're able to fill the courses with. We'll be able to provide opportunity for a student or their student's interest to participate in course.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
All right, next slide. Let's keep it moving. Nope, we knew you were going to ask. And this section should go pretty fast because you got the deep dive this morning. But I'll call Mr. Ray up to the podium. This is, again, a focus on employee compensation. Again, we won't belabor things that you've already heard, but there was one additional highlight that we need to make in this particular section.
Yes, I'm going to go through it. Obviously, as superintendent, it's employee optimizing compensation and benefits, which we talked this morning. This was one of your considerations. We wanted to be the highest. Just want to remind you about the PSR contribution that we want to do for those employees, matching contribution for PSERS employees. And so that's something that we want to budget in this, and it's at $805,000. You can see there. You can see the overall chart, what we have working with finance. We'll work through that, but you can see the totals that we have on that slide as well, including longevity step along with the compensation plan. And the COLAs listed on this slide as well. Going to stewardship.
That COLA,
Oh, sorry.
is that COLA based on the revised numbers or on current numbers?
That COLA is based on current numbers, but we're still working with finance because to some degree the compensation study that was done was all employees, including all funds, whereas finance does the general fund. So there's kind of like a match that we have to get on there, but it should be about close. Because finance is doing just general fund employees, whereas the compensation study was all employees based on, regardless of funding, federal and state.
But I guess the difference would be about $700,000 new versus old.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got to, just like I said, we got to
All right.
reconcile that with finance, but yes.
All right, we have our last 2 sections, and that's our community engagement communications piece and our operations teams. Investments, these should go fairly quickly because they are
Very quickly, we are continuing to invest in the work that we do in engagement and outreach. Appreciate the support of the board for expanding the growth of our department. We, as you recall from last year's budget process and into this particular school year, we launched a new arm of public affairs, an engagement and outreach arm. Great work going on with our newly hired, only a few months in, Executive Director of Engagement and Outreach, Tamika Tribble. She's doing great work and working on a district-wide engagement plan for parents, stakeholders, business partners. And we realize that as we go into the next budget cycle, we really need to provide supports for that particular division arm now, departmental arm of the division. You'll see there's about an additional $50,000 in there that really supports collateral materials and events and the work that they're doing, grassroots on the ground. One of the bigger parts that you'll see as we're looking forward into our work for utilizing and leveraging tools and technology that expand our engagement and outreach practices and go to an area that Dr. Howard Hall, you specifically mentioned today in culture and climate. We're looking at moving into the work that we do to be more real-time, engaging with families and customer service oriented. We know that the impact that our clients have, our parents and the community at large, many times they're having that first engagement with the district through our digital platforms. So we're looking at tools that engage with the existing website. We've migrated to the final site, a platform on the district website. We found tools that integrate very nicely with that to provide a customer service level of engagement with parents, stakeholders, students, and employees that may have questions about initiatives that the district is doing, or simple things like how do I register or where do I find my bus route? And they'll be getting real-time engagement through this. Some AI-driven type of platforms that are pulling from existing resources that are already on our website and available there. So you really get away from that three-click dynamic, which we already are focused on as just good metrics for the engagement of our website. But this tool and this platform will provide an interactive type of component. Will also allow us to streamline inbound communications to appropriate departments for deeper engagement and questions that the parents and our client base may have. We see this having a real payoff in the work that we're doing in culture, climate, customer service oriented district, and leveraging parent tools, existing tools that help with business partners, stakeholders at large, for a greater payoff for us as we go forward. And you'll see in the strategic plan, culture and climate matters, and the way that we impact the work on our community at large, knowing some of the work that we're doing with the initiatives of the district, sometimes complex matters. It's easy to have a tool that can really pull from a wide breadth of tools and resources that we already have and streamline our inbound communications. So that's really what that $150,000 represents. We're hoping to get this launched early in this budget cycle with some startup costs with existing monies, but there would be an ongoing expense that would be grow the budget in our public affairs division.
Ms. Corral.
Super quick, I know we're short on time. Love this. I think it's fantastic. As we're looking at continuing these tools, I think we need to, anyways, I would encourage us to look at how individual school sites are being managed. There's
This
a
includes-
huge.
This includes the school sites, right?
Yeah, there's a component in this that will feed to our school sites. The platform that we're talking about is really from a district engagement standpoint. There are tools that we also are finding in some of the resources that we're looking at that feed down into the individual school sites. It's important to recognize, though, as you're saying, every school has its own identity and its own community that we recognize and we support fully under the full umbrella of Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools. It's only as good as those who are investing in it and using it daily with topical, relative content. And that is a performance management component. We've heard that word already this go around in this particular work that we're doing in how we engage with our schools and how we work with the school level individuals who are managing those components. The transition to the new website in many ways is designed to also overcome that, to streamline that that and make that process easier and less burdensome for site-based staff. But some of that is performance management.
Okay, well, let's just make sure we're giving those schools the training that they need to do it. And, because right now, the disparities between some of those
Yes.
websites is.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes. All right, let's hit our last area.
All right, so custodial, this is an additional allocation using the current Godot formula for sites that we have added. So for example, Bloomingdale is a larger site, so they would need additional custodians. So that is across the district. And then for the pools, hearing from the board at the last meeting, we understand the intent to review the finances to open 2 pools, Jenkins and Haven. It would be outsourcing the lifeguards for about $70,000 for 2 lifeguards per site to operate that from the end of May to the very beginning of August, and then ongoing maintenance of those 2 pool sites. So in total, the ongoing pieces would be about $310,000. Then one-time expense to bring Haven up to par. This is an estimate based on the Jenkins pool. However, until we get in and really dive in, we wouldn't know what all needs to be done, but we have estimated it at $180,000. And then the closure of the 2 other pool sites would be about $150,000. So in total, $1.1 million. And we gave you a little side note that said we received the Jenkins funding already, so that repair was not included in these estimates.
Dr. Howard Hall.
I'm big mad.
Okay.
Closure of Schumann and Brock?
Of the pools for
Of the po-
those sites.
No, not acceptable, and it's going to be, I've attended several neighborhood meetings, and our parents are upset about it. And I did hear in one neighborhood meeting that Haven would be included, which I didn't know anything about. I guess Ms. Smith must have got an insight on that because
We
I didn't.
talked about it
I
in February
wasn't
board
sure about
retreat.
Haven, but all of those pools need to be open. And I know that I don't expect for the school board to supply the lifeguards. That's something, see, we're working in silos and it needs to stop. And some people are feeling that, well, the parents need to complain. No, they don't, because the parents elected us to speak for them. Not only as school board representatives, but the city officials as well as the county. And it is shameful, I'm very upset about it, that we're making plans to close those 2 pools that's on the east side, west side, and West Savannah. Now, Haven is more considered west side, Schumann, east side, Brock, West Savannah. And we need to do something about it. We need to come together as a county, not just the school district, but city officials need to be sitting to the table with us to figure out how to keep these pools open in our neighborhoods, in those communities.
Dr. Brinkman?
I am all for being out of the pool business 100,000%. I'm fine with the city and county taking it over. They got city and county pools. They can take our renovated Jenkins pool and they can man it. It's just the overreach of public education. We're just adding things that are outside of teaching. And yes, we could teach swimming, but I am all for not having ongoing maintenance costs of $240K to have 2 pools going. I mean, Haven and Jenkins are 2.6 miles apart from each other. So if we're going to get in the pool business, do I get a pool on the south side? Do we get a pool from the school district on the islands? Do we get a pool? I mean, if we're going to start talking about now having to have pools that are equitable for our entire county from the school system, we're going to have to build a ton of pools. It's just, I'm all for the city and the county picking up, but I believe we're going to struggle to find those lifeguards. And I'm glad we outsourced it for somebody else to find it, because then we would have had to have another position to manage them. So I'm just done with the pool business.
So, by the way, one of the reasons the city and county got out of it is that they couldn't find lifeguards. So I agree. We're in the education business. We're not in the pool business. The liability alone, based on something that I know happened in the past, the liability alone, I think it is irresponsible for us to be in that business. I understand the frustrations of neighborhoods not having it. That is something that the city and county should be doing. We have got to stop doing things that the city and county should be taking care of. And the reason that they were able to wipe their hands clean of it is because they knew they could throw it on us, and we'd fall for it. I'm not falling for it. Ms. Hall.
I certainly think we could help by convening a meeting with the county and the city. Certainly, there's nothing preventing us from doing that. We have a lot of children who drown. We have a lot of children who just never learn how to swim because they just don't have the resources around them to do that. I don't know how, my goodness, I have 2 children who swim like fish, but they grew up on Hilton Head and they had every opportunity to do that. And that's made a huge difference in their lives. So whatever we can do to promote that, that's a wholesome, wonderful part of your life if you know how to swim. So if we don't want to take it on ourselves, certainly let's have a meeting with the county and city officials to see if something could not be done instead of just, throwing our hands up and letting it go.
Mr. Katchmar.
These discussions have happened already, and there was an MOU in place where we'll give them the pool, they're responsible for running it, and they've told us before we haven't because we can't find staff. Now, are they managing it well? I don't know. But I agree with what everybody has said so far. They're all valid points. But I don't want to be in the pool business either. I would be fine deeding those properties to the city and/or county in exchange for them giving us something we need adjacent to one of our properties. But that's our contribution. We'll give you the pool. We'll give you the land. You can own it, but you guys run it as part of your rec programs. That's not something we should be running year-round, particularly in the summers when we're not in session. But there's a way for us to contribute to letting people be able to swim, but staying out of the day-to-day as well and not have the ongoing costs. So I think that should be the discussion, because we've already had the discussion before about how do we partner on this. We had an MOU, and they couldn't find what they needed.
Mr. Smith and Geis is 1240.
I'll strive to be very expeditious. I believe that everyone has made a valid point. I totally understand where we are and how of a slippery slope this could be. But my concern is when we look at the prior conversations, when we talked about keeping Jenkins open and the other pools closing, for me, it wasn't a problem of what school was going to stay open. It was the problem of what schools were closing or what pools were closing. And when we talked about keeping Jenkins open, and I'm not speaking to anyone directly, but I am going to make this statement. When we talked about keeping Jenkins open, no one really said at that point, we're not in the pool business. But when we started talking about another school or another community, those pools being open, it became, okay, well, we're not in the pool business. Well, and let me say this. If it was said, I didn't hear it. So let me say that.
It was said
So
by many people on this board.
So now I've been clear about stating that I didn't hear it. So if it was said, but I didn't hear it. So now that we're talking about keeping the pools open in other communities, it's being said and it's being voiced that we need to get out of the pool business. We're not in the pool business, but we do teach cooking. We're in the cooking business. We do teach cosmetology. We're in the cosmetology business. We do auto body work. We're in the auto body business. But when it comes to pools, all of a sudden, we're not in the pool business. So all of these things are a part of education. All of these things are a part of building character for our students and a brighter future. So I don't believe that we should say we're not in the pool business when it comes to this. All of these are liabilities. All of these are things that need our consideration. But when we talk about it being in certain neighborhoods, then it becomes a greater liability. So I'm hearing.
So let me make this very clear. No one on this board has anything against any community. No one on this board prefers any community over the other. And yes, people on this board did say we are not in the pool business.
Right.
Okay, cooking and all those things are under CTAE. The pool business is not. We are about teaching our, you know what? We can't even get our kids at grade level on reading right now. And no.
So
and hang on, and fiscally speaking, because this is the taxpayers' money, fiscally speaking, to get into the pool business would be the most irresponsible fiscal thing we could do. Let the city and county, I want every kid to learn how to swim. You know what? Let's talk to the Y. Maybe the Y wants to take them over. But let someone else do it. We don't have the money. We don't have, oh my God, and just the legal alone. It only takes one kid drowning. And by the way, this school system has been sued before when we were in the pool business. So, you know, and please, 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 do not try to turn this into a us versus them thing. It is not. No one on this board operates that way. And the small implications and the not so subtle implications are offensive.
Well, I'm so sorry that you're offended by any statements that were made, but I will go further and ask this question. Was there a conversation about us closing all pools and leaving Jenkins open? Was there a conversation about that, Mr. Moss?
Yes, and people said no.
So, but did it pass? Did it go through? Was that going to be the plan?
Yeah, sure.
It was going to be the plan to keep Jenkins open, but to close all of the others. So now that we're having a conversation about adding to the list of pools that would be left open, it's now an offensive statement to say, let's keep more open. So my thing is, if we're going to close one, let's consider closing them all.
That's fine. That's fine with us. I mean, the 2019 agreement actually included Haven as part of the contract with the city that they weren't able to fulfill. So saith the internet.
Gotcha. But again, the Jenkins being left open was passed. That's my point. That's the point that I'm striving to make to you, Mr. Moss.
Okay. Point made. Anyone else? I'm so sorry.
Just a few more.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So,
Ms. Hall wanted to say something.
Ms. Hall?
All I want to say is that we can disagree without being disagreeable.
Correct.
My father taught me that early on. I still say, let's have the conversation with the city and council and county, because what Mr. Cashmore was saying could work. So let's have that discussion.
could be, yes. But for now, I have included as a opportunity for you all to consider. I wanted to show you what the dollar amounts are, so that you know what the price implication is. And Dr. Howard Hall, I don't want to minimize your comment that you're upset because it includes the closure of 2 pools. We would just need to increase the dollars if we're talking about increasing and keeping all the pools open. So I just want to, the number that you see there is a number reflective of keeping 2 pools open and closing 2 pools. If we kept all the pools open, that's more of a financial investment.
Now, one of these schools will be closing Schuman will be closing.
Yes. So to round out this, and we are at the rounding out place, we really wanted to get your feedback on, are we on the right track with the list of recommendations that you have seen today? What additional programs or initiatives are not listed here that should be? And I know that we have at least one board member who's shared that he believes there are a couple of things that might be missing that we need to add. And then what choices and trade-offs are we desiring to make if there are new items that need to be considered, such as keeping an additional pool open? So I don't know that we have time to have that robust conversation because we need to eat, but it is a conversation that we need to have because this is the basis of the final budget that I will bring to you all for approval. So if I don't have guidance, then I'm not sure where we should continue to evolve in our research.
Ms. Hall, and then Dr. Greenway.
I would like to say that what resonated most with me was the academic progress that this represents. I am thrilled to move ahead as from what we learned today in terms of the academics and Mr. Barnes' presentation.
Just a big picture, adding the things from academics, as Ms. Hall stated, but also having the metrics as they're added to the inventory for our return on investment. And then if there's anything from that inventory that we're going to really look at these, I think they were red in color maybe, or orange, I can't remember. And if any of those have not passed the district's first look as possible inventory items that will be removed, or if there are ones that are on the lifeline for the next year's budget. So we kind of understand that we are trying to really tease out what is working and what is not, and that everything in our budget should have, hopefully, some way to look at return on investment. It might not always have a metric, but at least some way to scale it.
Sure.
Ms. Grabowski.
Just quickly, 2 points. I agree with Ms. Hawley and Dr. Bringman on the academic focus, and especially our high-performance schools, our highly challenged schools pilot project. And I also want to commend the team for the work that has been done leading up to this point. So, for example, the staffing allocations about the secretaries and the media clerks, we had that conversation previously. So it's really helpful to get the information as we're going to be able to see how it all then fits together. So thank you to the team for all of your work on that.
Hearing a lot of guidance on compensation, and that's actually the
Yes,
biggest.
I definitely
the
support.
biggest piece of the pie.
I definitely support the compensation recommendation.
Okay, Cashmore. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be.
Roger nodded at me.
Teacher kicked in, sorry. Teacher mode kicked in.
ROI, academic focus, teacher recruitment, staff recruitment and retention, which includes compensation. And then also, I mentioned this earlier, relatedly, we've talked in the past about workforce housing, subsidized childcare. I know those are specialized things. I know we don't have the expertise in-house, or maybe we do, or maybe people are just stretched. I'll say again, the board has $500,000 in contingency budget money every year. I am happy to move to spend some of that to get the right people in to expedite workforce housing and subsidized childcare discussions. The workforce housing in particular, we've been talking about for several years now, including since Dr. Watt started. I'm just highlighting those two things. And then last retreat we had, we talked about transportation and trying to solve transportation issues. It's a comp issue, but it's also a bus size issue, et cetera. The last retreat, it was about a year ago, 2 retreats now, specific commitment to trying to solve transportation, to reestablish charter and choice transportation. That's still high on my agenda as well.
Megan Davidson, could you give a 30-second overview of where we are with the transportation and extending it to choice?
Absolutely. So we are in transportation evaluating a pilot to, for next year, that would be one school in which they had geographical location pickup sites to try to attempt to resolve the transportation challenges for our choice or schools and program.
So looking at doing it at one school next year, potentially a K-8, to see what the piloting, to see what the implications would be, and then expanding it across more schools is where we are right now. We don't foresee a budget implication, which is why you don't see it in this presentation, because we've already ordered the buses we need to do a pilot. I know that doesn't satisfy your request, nor does it satisfy what I want to happen, but we have to start somewhere, and some of this does have to do with a workforce challenge. If we go too fast and I don't have the bus drivers to cover it, then.
Dr. Hoskins Brown, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so I was just told that we haven't had lunch yet before I asked the question. I just wanted to know, thank you, and sorry I wasn't able to attend the workshop, but my student who had her comprehensive did pass.
All right.
So we're closer to another PhD in marine science. My question is just, how is the pilot that you're drafting different from the pilot that we did before?
It is going to be a pilot, so it'll only be one school. So we can more carefully, because what I heard historically was that it was maybe a flawed implementation. It wasn't necessarily that it didn't work. It could have been implementation. So we're going to scale down so that we can really have our hands around it before we try to take it to scale and do it across the district.
And
Okay,
geographical pickup locations. So if a pickup location was Woodville-Tompkins, the parents would take their child to Woodville-Tompkins, and then the bus would pick them up to take them to the pilot school.
Okay, so, but we did this. We had hubs,
Yes.
and the pilot before that was interesting to me is that it did it across the grade spectrum. So you had a realistic idea of what the impact would be. I mean, because if I can just do one thing out of 57 things I'm supposed to do on that day, I can do it very, very well. It's the integration across the other tasks that brings me challenges in doing my work. So I'm just wondering if it's going to be artificially successful because you've made the goal small.
It could be.
And so I just want to know the comparison between the difference and the
old and the new.
explanation for the difference from the previous
Yes.
pilot.
And to be honest, we need someone to give us a little bit more information on the previous.
When was that? I remember we talked about it at the time, but I don't remember them ever actually picking kids up and taking them to home.
Because none of us were here. We weren't here, so we don't know.
We voted against doing it.
Okay, well, see, again, I'm coming at 12:52 when you've already had the discussion, but when I'm thinking about transportation pilot, I'm thinking about the previous transportation pilot. So I think we did have some pickups happening on Wilmington Island to get folks out to TEMA early on, and there was something about that. That was during the Byrne administration. And then there was the pilot of changing, it was a bell time. Yeah, so we had the bell time change for a later high school start that we did across elementary, middle, and high. And then we had a hub pilot that I know we did on Wilmington, Island, and I can't remember where the other ones are. So we can just, I got a box of papers. I'll see if I can find
Yep, that'd be
that
great.
information.
Any other feedback on what you saw today? Because that helps us.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, overall feedback, I was very impressed with the plans for our high-need school as well as compensation, because compensation is across the board. It not only impacts the high needs, but also our schools that are performing well. We want them to continue to show continuous growth and excel and exceed the expectations. So it's compensation most definitely, because that includes everybody, classified and certified, as well as high needs. Still upset about the pool situation. It was mentioned about them and they. I feel like them, because Brock represents my district. And
Understood.
I'm upset.
Understood. Any other feedback before we close out with just two more slides?
Ms. Campbell.
I'll jump in since everyone else has jumped in now. I love the pilot study for the high need schools. I think it's amazing that we're focusing on the schools that we're trying to assess where the issues lie and how to help them, and we're not just going in, throwing money at it. I think we'll figure out what we need to do, and then maybe next time we can do it for more. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
I
Okay,
think the
so
pilot is going in a great direction, and I'm excited about it. I'm not going to say that the pool is perfect, but it's certainly getting there. So with more editing, I think we'll be able to get to a great place. Thank you for all the hard work that you've done thus far, as well as to your team. Thank you.
Okay, so, I haven't said anything.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, no, everything's been great. The only thing I would add, and we've talked about this a lot, I am a firm believer in merit pay, and I really want to look at some way of incentivizing our teachers. And, maybe we can do this with outside money or whatever, but a bonus program for our teachers, so.
Got it. All right, just to close out, a couple of more slides on next steps. We will, as we begin to refine these things based on your feedback, survey the community. We'll also begin to share with different community groups and leadership groups to include professional senate. We will this year gather feedback from principals and extended cabinet. And obviously, we had a big discussion today about federal, the unknown and potential impacts. We'll continue to monitor those and leverage those mitigation strategies as needed and only if needed. If you'll go to the next slide. The last thing that I want to highlight to you, and I will share in my next update in more detail, as a part of our stewardship and focus on making sure that we're spending wisely and strategically, I feel it is necessary and needed that we have a deeper dive into our finances, policies, department practices, so that we can have an even stronger understanding of our financial position, how we make decisions, the tools that we use, the efficiencies in which we operate. So I am looking to bring on a third party to spend the next few months with us doing a deep dive into our finances, much deeper than what our audit detailed, so that we can understand where we are and be better positioned to move into the future. And so in the month of May, you will likely get a proposal. I'll share in advance so you have time to ask questions and look at it more deeply. But it would include facets that are covered here on this slide, but you'll likely see a contract request to come in to fund this third-party evaluation and support. But I wanted to highlight it as a next step. Awesome. And this.
Okay, so I will accept a motion to adjourn this workshop. It's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Aye. Let's go to lunch. Hey, guys, let's.
I think, did somebody have a question?